So good evening, everyone. Let's do better than that. Good evening, everyone. So glad to have you here this evening. My name is Daniela Borum. I am Special Projects and Partnerships in the Office of Councilman James Tate. And I also am the program manager or coordinator for D1 CAN. So our D1 CAN is our District 1 Community Accountability Network. It is our gun violence prevention initiative that is focused on District 1. And so tonight what we wanted to do is to thank you all for coming, but to also talk a little bit about a lot of the violence that we've been experiencing in our district. So I don't want to go too far. That's what I'm missing. I'm missing Councilman Tate. So I want to definitely bring Councilman Tate up so that he can welcome you all. So give Councilman a big round of applause.
Thank you, Daniela Borum. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. I'll just take your mic. Thank you. Thank you, Daniela Borum. Y'all give Daniela a round of applause, please. She put this together, and she was tasked to put this event together some time ago. She, along with Aisha Mitchell as well, y'all give Aisha a round of applause, pulled together a group of individuals that I'm sure you're going to gain a lot of information from and be able to take this beyond just the four walls of this particular room. That's always the challenge. How do we get the information that we have today outside and implement it to create change within our community? And I think that we're going to be beginning to, we'll be able to do that starting with a lot of the information you have today, one of which is being what is the actual climate of violence in District 1? We know what we read and what we see in the papers, but what's the real story? We have that information for you. But then in addition to that, as we talked about all of the things that we see in the media and even on social media, all of those things matter and they count. And so we want to figure out how do we combat all of this imagery that's coming to our spaces, our children's spaces on a regular basis. How do we combat that, but also understand that there ain't no stopping technology. So we've got to always keep both of those mindsets in play. But in addition to all of those platitudes, I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you being here, and thank the team, and thank Daniela for pulling this thing on. And we're going to have a great time today, right? Y'all got to do better than that, though, because we got to have a little bit more energy. I know the food was good. Wayne County Community College District, thank you all for allowing us to have this space. Y'all give it up for Wayne County Community College District. Ribs, Crab House Ribs and Soul for the food. Y'all give it up for Crab House. Who else do we have to thank? Chemical Bank. Y'all give it up for Chemical Bank coming through. But also our partners with the D1 CAN partners. Daniela, if you can talk about some of our partners that we have who are part of the board as well. And I'm just going to sit down, and Daniela's going to be the next voice that you hear.
Thank you, Councilman. So, yeah, we have quite a few partners, and I like to call them friends and family. Like I mentioned before, there are a lot of people doing a lot of the work. So we have Family and D Live. They're here, and you'll hear from them later this evening. We also have a relationship with Black Family Development, the police department, obviously. We house within our district the 2nd, 6th, and 8th precinct. We also have partners in Ceasefire. We have partnerships with, I'm trying to think a couple more. Black Family Development, who am I missing? Oh yeah, VIP Mentoring, I'm sorry. They're one of our large partners for our mentoring program. So those are some of our other partners. What we normally do is highlight them at different times as we move forward with our, I don't know if this is working, with our community forums. Okay. So what I plan to do tonight is to talk to you all about District 1, or I'm sorry, D1 CAN. I see a lot of new faces. Can I just see a show of hands? Who's here for the first time to a community forum? Okay, quite a few people, and that's good. We definitely love to see, we always have a lot of people that come and support on a regular basis, but it's always good to see new people in the room as well, because that means to me that we're getting the word out. And so that's the only way we can grow this community, right? So I really wanted to just talk to you all about the mission of District 1, or D1 CAN. And so we had started out, I'll say, I think a year ago, a little over a year for me, started out. And so when we looked at gun violence, we wanted to kind of figure out what are some of the things that cause a lot of the gun violence, right? Because it's a lot more than just, people aren't just picking up guns for no reason. There's a lot of underlying causes. And so what we found is that some of those causes include allure of street life, so thinking that hanging out, brandishing guns or carrying weapons is cool. We also looked at the lack of family structure, so maybe there's some things going on at home that a lot of our young people, or not just young people, people don't have a lot of control over. Trauma and mental health. So a lot of us have been exposed over time to a lot of violence or just situations beyond our control, and maybe not having someone to kind of share in guiding you towards rectifying those issues or just dealing with those issues, period. And so Councilman mentioned our partners. What we did was we pulled together our steering committee based on those same social factors I just listed. So that's where you hear we got DLive, we have Black Family Development, the police department, Ceasefire, a lot of new, I'm thinking also as our ComStat friend too. So a lot, just everywhere I go, I know we have someone from the ATF here as well. And so it's been a year for me in terms of building up that steering committee. I don't think it's ever gonna be complete because there are a lot of people working in silos, not only in the city, but across the county and in the state. And so even though they're not doing that work in District 1, they still are the experts in those areas. I'm trying to tell you, trying to pull together data, trying to totally have information on trauma and how to support someone with that. It's not something that one person can do by themselves. So I'm really grateful to our steering committee, and so what we put together was our mission. And so basically the mission of D1 CAN is to combat the effects of gun violence by fostering relationships through mentorship, dialogue, like we're going to have here tonight, as well as holding the community accountable, holding ourselves accountable to say, hey, we started out on this road, and it's not an easy road, but we're going to continue to move forward. And so that was just kind of how we started out with the mission. We wanted to look at different components. What can we do right away? And so some of that included our team forums and mentoring. I think mentoring to me was an easy idea, but not an easy lift, right? So we started working with VIP mentoring to help support us in starting our site location programs. We wanted to work within our district, right? So we have 4 high schools and 13 elementary middle schools. That's a lot. It's a lot of schools when you have 0 mentors signed up. So what we did was we chose 3 of our schools to start in. Gompers is one of them. That's an elementary middle school. We chose CMA, Communication Media Arts High School, as well as Detroit Leadership Academy. So we started there with VIP building that program. It's been a little challenging, but again, like I said, it's not an easy lift. So right now, I know Gompers is up and running, and I see a mentor in the building that supports that program. So we've been able to meet with the kids every Wednesday at 1 o'clock if anybody is available. But on Wednesday afternoons, we're meeting with the students and talking with them about how to kind of stay out of trouble, steer clear, or just talk about the things that maybe are really affecting them closely. So with our teen forums, we connected with Henry Ford High School and Communication Media Arts. So I mentioned we have 4 high schools, but we started with those 2. And so we went and just had a real intimate conversation with about 40 students in each school and their libraries, and just came and talked to them and wanted to know, like, what's on their mind, what have they been exposed to, what kind of things are they looking for from us, what kind of support would they need from us. And from that, we were able to build relations and connections with our young people, right? Because that's really important. We talk a lot about relationship building, and it's important not just to know your neighbor, but to know the young people in your community as well, and let them get to know us. So our community forums is another component, like you are here tonight. And so this is actually our 3rd community forum. We've had 2. The first one was last August, and so we were able to talk about relationship building, debunking, or demystifying, I think, the faces of gun violence. So really understanding that we can really judge people based on what we see or hear about them on the news, but not really understanding the full story. So what we're looking forward to moving forward is hosting our community forums. We're going to continue those. So tonight we're here to talk about violence in plain sight. Councilman talked a little bit earlier about how technology is moving forward, and it's not something that we can stop. So we have to be ahead of it and really understand what our kids are being exposed to. So you'll hear from an expert that has done some research in video games and the effect on adolescents. And we'll also talk about we'll hear from a data expert that really understands what's happening in our district and be able to share that information with you. And then you'll hear again, like I said earlier, from one of our partners. So without further ado, I want to introduce Victoria Hosey, Victoria Hosey. She is the lead CompStat analyst at Wayne State University in their Urban Studies department. And she also, many of you may know her, she runs the CompStat meetings for the 2nd and 8th precincts. So give a big round of applause to Victoria.
Thank you. Okay. Hi, everyone. So as she stated, I'm a CompStat analyst for the Wayne State Center for Urban Studies. And we collaborate with the Detroit Police Department using their crime reports database to analyze crime occurring by precinct. So I'm actually the lead analyst for 8th and for 2nd, and I see a familiar face or two, so good to see you all. And I analyze things based on the number of crimes happening, crime categories, using the main categories of aggravated assault, robbery, homicide, and then sexual assault within the violent crime category. And then for property crime, I do larceny, burglary, damage to property, which is usually related to burglary incidents, and also arson. So I will go ahead and talk about I'll go ahead and talk about what's happening for the year-to-date values. And what year-to-date means is just whatever date that you actually collected that data from that date to January 1st of that year. So for these values, 2018, for example, our year-to-date is April 5th. So from January 1st of 2018 to April 5th of 2018, there were five homicide incidents in the district. And then the same thing, actually, so the same data for 2019, the same amount of homicides. And then for aggravated assaults, you see a little bit of a shift. There are 85 for the year-to-date, for April 5th year-to-date in 2018. And then for 2019, there's a bit of an increase up to 102 aggravated assault-related incidents. And I don't think aggravated assault and assault, I don't think people really explain the differences between that, so I'll just mention it. If you do know, that's fine. But two of the really defining factors that will make an assault an aggravated assault is a deadly weapon and also the degree of bodily injury that occurs to the victim. Could you go back to the, okay, for robbery, there's also an increase, so 39 incidents. 39 incidents in 2018, and then a slight increase, not that great of an increase, up to 42 for 2019, so very similar crime patterns between 2018 and 19 for robbery. And this is a map of the homicides occurring in 2018 and where they occurred. As for vicinity, the only very similar vicinity are those two that happened along Southfield Freeway, just below Finkel Avenue. Other than that, they're pretty spread out for what you would usually see for crime categories, for other crime categories. You'll see some clustering that we'll talk about later. The turquoise circle that you see here, where you see killer and then along Finkel on the left, that denotes a domestic violence related homicide. So that was a homicide that was either a family member, an intimate partner, people who live together, people who have children in common. That's how you define domestic violence. And these are the aggravated assault crimes for 2018 as well. 2018 as well. We're still talking about 2018. For aggravated assault, the clustering in 2018 is happening sort of like in the southern portion of the district, so between Southfield and then I believe the boundary stops at Ardmore just before Schaefer, and then here 7 Mile and down to the Schoolcraft street right here. So the clustering of aggravated assaults happens there for 2018. I do need this because I have some values as it relates to domestic violence. Because as I mentioned, domestic violence is denoted by the turquoise circle, so there are different percentages of which aggravated assault incidents were domestic violence related and which ones weren't. So for 2018, 58% of the reports were domestic violence related. This is actually pretty common for when I'm doing CompStat meetings for the precincts for a 28-day period. Usually about half of the aggravated assault reports are domestic violence related. We can. And these are the robbery. These are the robbery incidents for 2018, with the clustering really occurring at that Grand River and Greenfield intersection of robberies. And the clustering just means like a concentration of more than maybe 4, I would say, of that particular category happening in an area. So you see at that intersection greater than 4, and that's certainly a clustering. Other than that, it's spread about. So the clustering is very particular for 2018 robberies to that area. Moving on to homicides for 2019 now, we're talking about the year-to-date again until April 5th of 2019. Homicide changed in 2019 as it relates to the number of arrests. There are 4 arrests in 2019 of the 5, whereas in 2018 we were only able to have 2 arrests for those cases. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that in 2019, the age range of victims, most victims were below 25 for homicide in 2019, between 21 and 45, but with the majority of the incidents here, most of the victims were below 25, whereas in 2018, you had a range up to 60 years old for the victims. Excuse me. But the lowest age range was below 30, so even that 5 years, that's a difference in an age range that you see younger victims starting to happen in 2019. Okay, and for aggravated assaults in 2019, the difference in shift and concentrations happens where there's a greater amount of aggravated assaults happening in the north end of the district. So 7 Mile and Losser and Evergreen area, where you see sort of this diagonal loose clustering happening. So 7 Mile is here, Losser is here, Evergreen's here. When you look at the number of incidents occurring, the majority are happening up in the northern end of the portion of the district, whereas in 2018 you saw that a majority was, trying to go back. Whereas in 2018 you saw that a majority was happening down here, the Finkel, between Southfield Freeway and Ardmore area. And then the values for domestic violence. For domestic violence reports, you have, instead of the 58%, there were 49% that were domestic violence related. So there's a 10%-ish decrease in domestic violence related reports for 2019. Okay, these are the robberies for the year to date for 2019, and there is definitely a change in the clustering. First change we see is, and this is similar to the aggravated assaults, you see things happening along 7 Mile. So this is certainly a clustering, and even though these are up, a little bit north of 7 Mile, a little bit south of 7 Mile, we're still seeing things on side streets and along 7 Mile Road for robberies. But you also see what we saw before, the Grand River and Greenfield clustering. However, it's starting to shift up towards Finkel for robberies. Okay, I have more things to say, so we'll move on to some characteristics for robberies. For robberies in 2018, victims of robberies have been targeted while walking. A lot of victims were targeted while walking at a gas station, whether pumping, going into the store. I've seen robberies inside of the store. I've seen robberies outside of the store, but a gas station robbery is very common in both of the precincts that I've done. I also support precincts 11, 9. I've supported for 6. So robberies at gas stations are unfortunately common. Also at the bus stop, a lot of people are robbed at the bus stop and targeted at the bus stop. And what we talk about in the CompStat meetings is how we can survey what's happening at the bus stops. So the Green Light program sometimes will catch bus stop footage from their cameras at different locations like gas stations, or whoever's purchased the Green Light cameras will catch footage at the bus stop, which is really useful and has landed in people being able to feel, I guess, that at least someone's gonna catch what occurred and possibly pursue, as in the police department. So, but yeah, unfortunately the bus stop is pretty commonplace for robberies to occur. As for those robbery characteristics, any questions?
We're gonna open up for questions.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you guys.
You can keep that one, Victoria. So just to clarify, so when I met Victoria, for some of you, you may know that I was always trying to figure out, how do I find the data? How do I find anything to back up the need for a program like this or other programs? So I was really glad to find Victoria. I shouldn't say find, but I had to make my way to a CompStat meeting, so I was really glad to do that. But if just for clarification, so the data that you're presenting is for gun-specific related crimes, is that correct?
Yes, so all of these crimes involved a gun because gun violence event. So I did have to adjust our data links to say equals gun, or I don't have to talk data, but that's what you do when you want to collect crimes that only related to a gun or gun violence.
So I noticed too, once I did make it to the CompStat meeting, that there were a lot of block club presidents, a lot of concerned neighbors. So from that standpoint, what is the importance of CompStat to those neighbors or those residents? Have they expressed any of that with you?
I think, and then there's residents
You
here,
gotta
so
hold the mic.
maybe who come, she
Hold the
consistently
mic.
comes to the meeting. I'm sorry. She
Miss
consistently
Menifee.
comes to the meeting. Do you want to, what's the importance?
State your question again. Just what's the
So yeah, so there are a lot of I think as a newcomer or someone newly engaged, I'll say, in CompStat meetings or just engaged in a community, period, what's the importance of those CompStat meetings to block clubs or to neighbors and residents?
Well, one, you can share the information that you gather from the CompStat meetings. You can take them back to your meetings and share that information. Like, has there been an uptick in auto thefts? You know, and then you can share with people what you need to do or regarding the auto thefts. And any of the crimes that have been committed, you can share with the residents, that particularly those that come to the meetings, and let them know exactly what's going on in their neighborhood or their community regarding the crime, and to let them know how the police keeps track of all of that information.
So you get a chance, too, to hear directly from the commander of that precinct as well as a lieutenant oftentimes. Is that correct?
Yes, the commander or the captain is usually there. And during Ms. Holsey's presentation, they will often ask the commander or the captain or the lieutenant. Yeah, yeah. Have there been any?
Hold the mic up.
Have
Oh,
there
just
been
hold it
any
closer.
arrests or anything? What have they found out about the? And oftentimes they get responses, and then you can go back and tell the residents this crime has been solved, or it's being worked on, it's looked at, and everything like that. Yeah.
Okay, thank
All right.
you.
And so as you all saw on the maps, if we can go back and show, just kind of go through the last couple of maps, and you look at all these dots. Go back to that one with that one right there. So you see this one, right? What does this represent to you? So this is the entire District 1, the map of the entire District 1, City Council District. What does this say? It affects all of us. It affects all of us. You don't have a cluster, all of them only up here, or only over here, or only over there. That's why we brought this map out. Because if you don't think that you have a responsibility, a role in this issue of gun violence, this map right here shows you is knocking on your door. It's knocking right on your door. Any questions regarding this information at all?
I just had a question. Does the star represent where the crime actually occurred, or is that where the person got arrested and
That's where the
But-
crime actually occurred.
it occurred at
Yes.
that location? Okay.
How much of this violence is gang related?
It's gang related.
How much of it is?
I don't have a percentage, but gang-related violence is definitely emerging as I see when I read reports this year. I know we've been talking about it in 8th Precinct and in 2nd Precinct. That's an emerging issue. Not emerging as in it hasn't been happening, but then an emergent prevalence of it occurring in our district.
Is this the entire District 1? Because our district a little bit, we're over a little bit further over to the right a little bit. Because I don't see where Longacre, Grandmont Community Association. I see Southfield down to bottom, but it's sort of over.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Do you go out to speak at radio patrols?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Do you go out to speak at radio patrols?
Yes, I
Have a
have.
card, please.
Sure.
Your statistics are fantastic, right? But the part she touched on it a little bit by saying we need to know how many people got arrested, how many people got, convicted, so that way we'll know that our efforts are being, is worth it. Because right now, if I didn't live here and I seen that, I wouldn't want to live over there. I wouldn't. But if I know that you gave the stats on how many people got, robbed, but another person standing next to you say, yeah, out of those 105, we convicted 89 of them, then I'm like going, okay, what they're doing is good. So I mean, statistics are good, but I want to see what's the result after that.
Well, you can see the arrests because they're denoted with the A. So that was an arrest, that was an arrest, that was an arrest, that was an arrest. I forgot to mention that, so thank you. Thank you, that was a good one, right? But not the convictions because that's confidential, unfortunately.
So let me ask this question. Someone asked, how does District 1 stack up with the other districts? I guess you probably don't do them by districts, you do them more by precincts, right?
Right.
So
Right.
how does the 8, 6, and 2nd, small piece of the 2nd precinct, match up with some of those other precincts that you see around the city of Detroit? I know we have a huge volume of density in terms of population, so that kind of plays a role into certainly the 8th precinct. But what do you see overall in terms of comparison?
Well, you really touched on it with the idea of density. 8th precinct is way more dense than a lot of the other precincts. I don't know the population numbers, but as you can see, or not as you can see, but you can see sometimes from the crime data of the amount of people who live there, you'll see less burglaries, but more like intimate partner violence or people who live in the precinct having conflict, like aggravated assault related crimes happening where more people live. So 8th precinct is a lot more dense than the other precincts. Most of District 1 is 8th precinct. 8th precinct is completely in District 1, whereas you have a small portion of 6th and 2nd. But as for how it matches up, I haven't really gotten a way to analyze that idea because it's always shifting, depending on where people are moving, depending on what is the new concentration area for the entire city. It's always shifting, so not completely sure about how it really, accurately really measures up.
So let's ask this question. So we know that when the winter comes, well, with the change of seasons, it typically brings a new round of, unfortunately, violence, depending on what season it is. If it's the holiday season at the end of the year, that's one situation. If it's the summertime, when it's warm outside, is another situation. When do we see the trends begin to change? I know, again, we want to use just the roundabout seasons,
Right.
but is there a particular month that we typically see, or what causes some of these trends to take place outside of even the months and change of weather?
Right. No, you definitely hit on the right point again. Seasonal violence occurring. So, for example, we could see a large, tremendous drop in robberies after the holiday season passed. After we passed December, robberies might have declined by about 50%. And it looks like, oh, that's a huge decrease, but it's because there was a large increase in robberies around November for my precincts in particular. And then you start to see more violence when you get toward the summertime. So maybe I wouldn't say April, but maybe May or June, you start to see an increasing amount of violence occurring.
My last question, and again, we'll open up for any questions on the floor, is, and we kind of touched on it earlier, but how can a resident really use this information to help combat gun violence in their community? It's one thing to take in, and sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming, especially when you see a map like this. You go, oh my goodness, I live right there in between the two spots there. How does someone take this type of information back into their neighborhood, back into their lives, and make it mean something, as opposed to just coming to another meeting with more dire information?
What I really appreciate about like the CompStat program, in addition to just the data, is that we have the AmeriCorps Urban Safety Program taking what we say, literally taking what we say. If we say there's a concentration between Losser and Evergreen on 7 Mile, then they're going out and they're taking car clubs for people to lock their wheels so that stolen vehicle might not be as much as a problem, or passing out leaflets and resources for people to come in and speak with specialists about domestic violence if they're a victim or if they're an offender, talk with someone, a therapist or someone about their issues. And there's programs for that are actually right within the police department. So we take the data and we do pass it to the AmeriCorps Urban Safety Program, and also the different resources that the police department has. If we find a specific case that needs attention, we might pass it to the social worker in the department.
So certainly for the folks who are here, but everybody who's watching at home as well, because we're also going to be broadcasting this or sending it out via streaming, video. What's the contact information if someone wants to get it on the email for CompStat? Do you have that information? Who to send that?
Sure.
Their email contact to?
Sure, the Detroit Community CompStat at gmail.com.
Can you say it one more time?
Detroit Community CompStat, and CompStat is spelled COMPSTAT at gmail.com.
Thank you, Victoria. And so those meetings, that email is to find out about meetings
Sure.
all around the
Sure.
city of Detroit.
Yeah, so we have meetings at each of the precincts. So if you'd like to attend any of the meetings, if you want your block club to attend any of the meetings, you can email that email address, and then we do get permission from the commander because we release confidential information and you signed a confidentiality agreement. But then following that, you would be allowed to come to the meeting.
Thank you. Give it up for Victoria, please. Okay, so we again wanted to talk really about violence in plain sight and really dive into what everyone is exposed to on a daily basis. And so I wanted to share just a stat that I found that said that by the time that our children reach middle school, they have been exposed to 8,000 murders and over, what was my number? 100,000 acts of violence. That's before you reach middle school, which is 6th grade, about 10, 11. That's a lot. And so that's through television, video games, what's happening at home, what's happening in the neighborhoods, music, videos, all kinds of things. So what I wanted to do was, with the help of Reginald, was put together just kind of a clip to kind of show you, almost in a day, if you think about it, how often you're bombarded with images of negativity or violence, and gun violence specifically.
Well, Detroit police are investigating the early morning shooting that left 3 people dead, including 1 teenager. Officers spent hours on the scene, at times asking the emotional crowd to please move back.
7 Action News reporter Jane Park is live on Detroit's west side. And Jane, we understand you're learning more about the victims and the shooting.
Show me your gun.
Boom, boom, I'ma pop your ass. Stop playing with me. You don't go to my house, I'ma skirt, pop your ass.
That's wrong.
Y'all gonna be dead on floor. I'ma go take y'all all y'all money. Stop playing with me. I'ma pop your ass.
So that was a lot. Can you imagine really looking at how much you're exposed to every day? But before we get into that, I do want to hear reactions from everyone. I want to introduce our guest for this evening, Professor Huseman. You want to come and join me? Give a hand for Professor Huseman.
Thank you, Daniela. It's a great pleasure to be here. To a great extent because, believe it or not, I grew up in this neighborhood. I went to Isaac Crary and graduated from Cooley High School in 1960. And spent a lot of time in North Rosedale and the women's club field there playing hockey. And so I have a great affinity to this neighborhood, even though now I live in Ann Arbor. It's a pleasure.
Because you live in Ann Arbor, yes.
No, but I lived here. on Asbury Park.
Right, but you're the professor in the LSNA, College of LSNA Communications, as well as psychology. And so your focus has really been violence and what that does to youth over time.
Well, basically for 45 years, I've been studying what makes youth more violent or less violent. And the unpleasant message I have to deliver is that the telecommunications revolution of the 20th and 21st century has really changed our environment for youth. For better or worse, the electronic media, television, video games, movies, social media have become great socializing factors for our youth, and parents have lost influence. The thousands of studies now really confirm the power of the electronic media to socialize youth, and particularly the insidious effect of violence in the media. Youth who are exposed to a habitual diet of violence, media violence, become more violent and aggressive. Is this a short-term effect? No. More aggressive youth grow up to be more aggressive adults. Again, we have hundreds of studies that have shown this.
I think we saw that too with the end of the video clip, the young boy playing with the gun. And I'm not sure if that was on World Star Hip Hop for some people that may be familiar with that website. But I'm not sure if that was a parent, an older sibling, or a friend. But then we have that, and then you get a chance to see what they grow up, when they grow up, that they still think that that's okay and that it's cool to do that.
They tend to think that. Why does this happen? Well, we understand a lot about it now, the psychology and neurology of it. Basically, children see and children do. Children are great imitators. They imitate from a very young age, and the imitation is not just short-term. What they're learning is normative beliefs about what's okay. They're learning scripts for how to solve social problems, and they're becoming emotionally desensitized to violence when they're exposed a lot to violence. In other words, violence does not affect them negatively the way it might have initially. And all these things combine to make it a very insidious effect that children who are exposed between the ages of 3, 4, 5, up to 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, to a lot of violence, then behave violently later on. Now, does this extend to gun violence? And now we have studies that show, yes, it does. If I can just take a few seconds, I'll tell about one study.
Okay, go ahead.
We've, in the past 10 years, been doing a study in Flint, Michigan. And we chose Flint because the schools wanted to cooperate, and because, as probably you know, Flint has a large amount of violence, of gun violence. And what we did is we interviewed a large number of kids when they were in the 2nd through 9th grade. And then we followed them up 10 years later, very recently, and looked at them 10 years later, and how many of them were carrying guns, how many of them were threatening other people with guns, how many were carrying other weapons, threatening other people with other weapons and using them. And here's what we found, that a number of things predicted that, as you might guess. A number of things about the family, about how much poverty they were living in. But the best single predictor of kids who grew up to use guns, carry guns, and use guns as weapons was the extent of their violent video game play. That was the best single predictor. Now, exposure to neighborhood gun violence also predicted significantly, and exposure to family gun violence also predicted. But the best one was how much they were exposed to video game violence.
Professor, how young were some of these students when you first started the study? At what age?
Yeah, 2nd graders, 4th graders, and 9th graders.
Playing video games, so violent video games.
Oh, yeah.
Were there any specific, I know a couple of clips we had, Grand Auto Theft.
Grand Theft Auto.
Yes, I'm sorry, thank you.
Grand Theft Auto was certainly the most, even at that time, was the most popular violent video game. I mean, there's there's many others. Now, I mean, I think the best way to view this to a great extent is like a contagious disease. Violence is a contagious disease. The more you're exposed to violence, you're going to be infected with violence and infect others with violence. And, you know, it's like any other disease. You've really got to try to intervene to stop the spread of it. That would be the best way to do it.
So practically, though, what can we do? Because when you're talking about video games, I think especially now, so this study started 10 years ago. I think now we are seeing younger and younger children with their phones from their parents. They're handing phones to them in church to keep them quiet, on the car rides between school and home. What practically can we do to curb their exposure to it?
Well, I mean, parents need to exert some control. Now, all video games are not bad. In fact, video games are wonderful teachers. That's why violent video games are so bad, because they teach violence. But there are a lot of video games like Minecraft, if you know that, Super Mario Sunshine, which teaches pro-social behavior. There's lots of video games that really teach interesting skills and teach positive pro-social behaviors. So I tell parents when I'm talking to them, have your kids play nonviolent video games. And they're very engaging. I have a 13-year-old grandson and an 11-year-old granddaughter, and those are the games they play. My daughter has been indoctrinated by me with what they should do.
Councilman, you want to jump in?
Yeah, Professor, that's an easy thing to say in theory, but the pressure is on. For any parent that's out there, and this is the thing that I've been even thinking about over on the side, it's not even just the parents or the young people that we have to be cognizant of playing these games and being exposed to these games. We're talking about 20, 30, 40-year-olds who also are exposed to these violent images and have resources that can potentially go out and potentially partake in some of that activity. How do we as an adult talk to another adult about them exposing their child to this type of video game and themselves even? I'll give you an example. I was at a hospital. I was telling Daniela this. I was there to see a relative, and there was somebody else there to see a relative. And this gentleman came in. I felt all proud, you know, the guy taking care of the kids. You know, you don't see that very often, so the imagery was awesome. So then I started hearing, pow, 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 pow. I mean, all kinds of craziness, madness. And it's one of the kids, had to be about 5 years old, if that, playing this game. And that's all they're playing with. They're only caught up in this world with all this gunfire on this game system. I didn't know how to approach that situation, because I felt it was, I should have said something, but is it really my place?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. Is it your place? But when you're talking to parents, I think you can tell them it's their place. It's the parents' place to do something. And, you know, it's not that they need to deny them playing any video game. It's they need to direct them to playing video games that don't teach violence. They need to direct them to watching TV shows that don't teach violence, watching movies. I mean, they're, you know, very highly regarded movies and TV shows that if you look at them closely, Game of Thrones and even Black Panther, they both really teach that might makes right, violence works as a success. So, you know, parents need to try to direct their children. They can't practically deny them completely playing video games or watching TV or movies, but they need to direct them to ones that will teach them the values that they care about.
Any observations?
It was, I'm sorry, to your comment that you made with the video games, I guess when I think of gun violence, I think of the killing of black people, of unarmed black people, but you were saying the video games. So when we're talking about gun violence, are we talking about both here, or are we just basically, or are we just talking about, you know, the kids watching video games, you know what I mean? Because that's what I'm thinking. When I think of gun violence, that's what I'm saying. I'm thinking of the many black people that are being killed that are unarmed. That's what I think of when I think of gun violence.
Yeah, so I think that's all of the above. That's a different type of gun violence that we see, but I believe what brought us here today is to talk about gun violence as a whole within our community, and how do we as community members address that issue of gun violence.
But I would say, police are exposed to the same kind of video games and movies and so on. And a lot of movies, particularly, not so much now, but particularly in the past, have portrayed black people as evil. And it's very unfortunate, but practically that's the whole genre of movies did. I mean, anybody see the Dirty Harry movies with Clint Eastwood? Who were the villains in most of them? Well, minorities. And that works to teach people various attitudes and beliefs, including policemen. We've really got to get rid of the way the media deals with violence.
But I will say, I do think there's some validity to that concern, because seeing these images of unarmed individuals being gunned down, that again takes the role of this violence that we see, and it becomes normalized in our day-to-day lives.
How you doing? My name is Royce Kennebrew, and I am a frontline educational professional. That means I'm a teacher. I have a classroom. Thank you.
Very good.
I have a classroom full of 5th graders, and I also do staff trainings as well. Yeah. And Doctor, I know how does social and emotional learning curriculum impact or mitigate the violence, gun violence that people use in social and emotional learning? Is like, basically, you can explain it to them about social and emotional learning.
Well, in fact, there's evidence that the right kind of social and emotional curriculum will reduce violent behavior in general. Basically, you're trying to teach the kids the way to solve social problems without being aggressive and violent. There have been a number of studies that have looked at curriculums. I did one long ago, actually in the Chicago area, where we found a significant effect by teaching 2nd graders what I would call normative beliefs, that it's not okay to do this and that. And the way we taught them is, it's kind of interesting, we had them make a video in which each of them gave that message, and then the others all watched it. So we were using, we psychologists know if you get someone to commit to a certain message, then they tend to believe that too. So it was easy to do with 2nd graders. And we found out a year later, those who did that behaved less aggressively than, we weren't looking at gun violence in 2nd graders, but we were looking at hitting, getting into fights and so on. So yes, it will work.
I have one over here.
Pastor Corey Chavis, I think one of the things that we maybe had not been mentioned is this centers of influence being able to speak to some of these trends, right? So a lot of times a parent may feel like it's not okay to tell a child, hey, you shouldn't be on this violent game. So I think the people that have influence in the life of parents need to teach some of the avenues that are not as specific to gun violence. For instance, I have a 14-year-old son. My son plays video games. He plays football and 2K. So there are a lot of sports type games. But I think a lot of times parents don't know the avenue to go to. Just like when you're trying to lose weight, if all you're used to doing is eating a bunch of pasta and stuff, you don't know what else is out there. So I think a lot of times our parents need to hear more of what are the other avenues they can go to be able to get some of the help. And definitely, again, as an educator, to the sister's point, it is absolutely the video games that make a child say some of the stuff they say, like in the video. It makes it okay for them to even think about holding a gun when you 2nd, 3rd, 4th grader, because you see it, you're actually doing it on the game.
That's right.
You see yourself doing it on the game already.
You're right. And education is a good way to try to deliver these changes, and to talk to parents too, as well as children, that people should not be afraid to exert control over their children.
Hi. I think that what we need to do is go back to how we was raised. In today's world, the mother and the father is always busy. It's a hustle and bustle. We need to go back to the community again and get community engagement and be that one big family again. And I think that if we could be that one big family again, look out for one another's children, and don't have an attitude if I say something to your child about doing X, Y, Z. Then that child will be held accountable. Because now that child will know, I can't do this because Miss such and such is going to get me. They're going to tell my mom. But at the same time, the mother has to pay attention to what it is, the mother or the father, they both, needs to pay attention to exactly what it is that that child is watching, but also playing. We didn't have games too much to play, but Pac-Man and Centipede. So what we did, we went outside and we played.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, the children do not go outside and play anymore because a lot of the rec centers was shut down. And when the rec centers shut down, that makes the children say, okay, well, I'm gonna sit in the room and I'm gonna find this video game to play. I know 5-year-olds that's sitting around playing it too, and I'll tell the mother, why are you letting this kid play this game? Well, I have a son and I have a daughter. When my son was growing up, he had no play guns, not even a water gun. He could not play any video games as growing up, play any violent games. And so till this day, my son is not violent. We call him Lover Boy because he loves everybody. Right. So, you know, you have to train your children up like that, but not only that, let your child know that if Miss such and such say something, you know what's gonna happen.
Yeah. And we should let other parents know that your approach is the right one. You should get a hand of applause for your approach. Seriously.
She should definitely get that hand of applause, but I guess we still have to ask the question. I mean, again, there was a lot that was poured into you, and I talk about this all the time. There was a lot that was poured into you that is not necessarily being poured into a lot of these other parents that are out here today. So we go back again looking at the data for the video games and some of that other, the imagery that's consumed. A great number of it are for folks who are not under the age of 18. They're folks who are 18 and over who are consuming this on a regular basis. We cannot carve out that large group of folks and only focus on children, because these adults are the ones who are providing this access to our young people. So I go back once again, how do we approach someone who we believe may be leading their children or themselves down a wrong pathway by only consuming or consuming too much, quote unquote, of this type of material? How do we approach that? Because that's a question I think many of us have to ask ourselves. We may not do it, but if someone who's close to us or may not be as close, how do we approach that situation?
Yeah. Well, we all do things that we don't want our children to do. And if we realize, if we really realize children see and children do, then even if you're doing something, you should avoid doing it in front of your children. You know, if you're going to play video games, go play video games somewhere not around your children so they don't come to believe that this is the thing they should do. Now, you know, as a psychologist, I can tell you there is some good news about this. And that is that the long-term effects of playing violent video games, watching violent movies and TV are much less when we look at adults whose brains are developed from 21 on. So I don't like violence.
Wait, say that again, Professor.
I don't like violence in the media, but if you adults in the room are watching it, it's probably not going to have a long-term effect on you. It is going to have a long-term effect on your children.
Got one over here.
And you were saying because their brains aren't as developed.
Yes,
okay.
because their brains are developed. They're learning scripts for how to behave, beliefs, and so on. And once those beliefs are crystallized, they become much more difficult to change. That's why later interventions with violent children are very difficult. But the
Because
good
they're
news
already set in a way.
The good news is if you've developed scripts for positive pro-social behavior, then when you're an adult, being exposed to violent movies, TV, or playing violent video games is not going to have a long-term effect. It may have a short-term effect, but it's not going to have the kind of long-term effect we find in children. That's what our studies show.
I had another question.
Got one here.
Oh, okay. My name is Robert Porter. This is my first meeting. Danielle invited me, I guess, 2.5, 3 months ago. I was in the office. And this caught my attention. I live in District 1, and I look at that number, 40,000. I moved to Detroit in 1965 from Dothan, Alabama. And Detroit was a great city. it was a safe city. And I enjoyed living in Detroit, and I still do. I'm here. But I'm here tonight because we need to fix the crime, the gun violence problem in Detroit. We need to stop talking about it. All of these things that we're talking about, they contribute to it. But we can fix it. We can fix a problem together, and we got enough people in here tonight to fix it. But my job when I retired was to fix problems. And I did root cause analysis, and if they work in business, they will work in government. We can fix gun violence in Detroit, and we can start today.
I agree.
We can start today. And I'm here, use me, I'm free. Because I'm retired, I got a good income, I don't need the money.
They missed that hand
Only
clap.
got time, right.
They missed that cue. They missed the cue.
If we're working on fixing the problem, I'll be here every day. But if we're gonna continue to talk about it, about the media and all these things that contribute, we can't do anything about it. But there's some things that we can do to change where we are, and if we don't change what we're doing, we won't change where we are. Okay?
Okay. Thank you. I'm glad that you're here today. We got one more.
So, how's it going, Doc?
Good. I'm very excited to be here.
So,
to tell you the
I
truth.
love the information that you provided us with. So, in my mind, for some form of mental clarity, I have a question that do a comparison. So, when we take a Grand Theft Auto, what we know is there's a supply and demand. So people are targeting a particular people. So is the effects that are happening in the urban communities with the video games the same as the effect that is happening in the suburban communities?
Yeah.
Or is it cross-cultural, I guess I'm saying?
What the study suggests is the video game is having the same effects, but there are other interacting factors that make the effects worse in communities that have other characteristics.
What about the lack of family structure?
Well, of course, the lack of family structure alone makes kids more at risk. More at risk for behaving aggressively, but more at risk for other things too. I mean, we can enumerate all these things, but if we focus on gun violence, I mean, the particular thing I would like to focus on is this view of it as a contagious disease. The more there's gun violence, the more people are exposed to it, the more they're going to think it's okay to use a gun, it's okay to carry a gun, and then the more gun violence there's going to be. It's like a spiral. It's like, there's a handout here, I illustrate the spiral. So we've got to break that cycle.
Have one over here.
I have one quick question. Now, I don't watch TV, so I'm going to ask this question because I don't watch it. But are there any commercials out here about gun violence of what your teachings are, doctor, and spiraling down on the cost and the effect of using guns? I think that's a start right there on doing commercials.
I actually don't know of any commercials really that take that approach. I mean, talking about gun violence, we can't avoid some politics here. And the Electronic Game Association, I mean, violent video games make more money than all the movies in a year. There's more money in video games and in television. I mean, and the Electronic Game Association is very protective of that. If anyone criticizes it, they'll be sued. I mean, California, several years ago, passed a law that said, very simply, a minor can't go into a store and buy a violent video game alone. If their parent goes with them, they can buy it, but they can't. Well, the Electronic Game Association immediately took that to court. It worked its way up to the Supreme Court, and the majority of the Supreme Court said it's an abridgment of the freedom of speech for minors. So the law is unconstitutional. Now the Supreme Court was split. If you're interested in Supreme Court things, read Justice Breyer's minority opinion, where he said that's ridiculous. It's, we need to protect our minors, and this is not really an abridgment. But there's this huge lobby out there that is really opposing anything that would reduce the play of video games, violent video games.
So that lobby is money.
Yes, it's money.
It's all, right. You have the police shows, not just the video games, but you have the police shows on TV.
Right.
Right. So.
Although in my
So let me-
experience, nothing has more money than the Electronic Video Game Association.
So we have the video games, we have movies,
Yes.
we have videos that go along with the music, but then we also have TV news and social media. And again, speaking to what those young ladies were talking about who were here earlier, the wall-to-wall coverage sometimes of some of these negative events have to have some kind of effect on us. If we're still trying to stay in tune to what's going on, how can you do that while still filtering out the negative images as well? How do you do those two things?
Well, let me say, as a psychologist, the impact on let's say, a 10-year-old of hearing a story about people murdered when you don't see anybody shooting, you don't see the actual act, is much less than the impact of a dramatic show in which somebody comes up and you visually watch them put a gun up against somebody's head and kill them. That's going to have much more impact on a 10-year-old than hearing a news story. In fact, a lot of 10-year-olds practically never listen to the news. So, to be honest, I'm much more concerned about, the way to think of it is the portrayal of the actual act is really the worst thing.
But I think to Councilman's point about what the young women were saying earlier, I think that for myself as a single person living alone, watching the news constantly would keep me paralyzed, I think. It wouldn't allow me to come out. I wouldn't, to your point, Sarah, you were talking about the safety of Detroit. I would probably feel a lot different about where I live. But I think, too, those constant portrayals of violence against minorities or black unarmed people, I think probably gives a message outside of urban communities that it's okay, or that it's the way
Well,
to,
it's normative.
to solve a
happens lot.
conflict.
You're absolutely right. In fact, there's a very interesting study that was done years ago by a man named George Gerbner at the University of Pennsylvania called the mean world effect, is what it's known. And what he showed is that the more people watch violent television, the more they think there's violence in their neighborhood, regardless of whether it is or not. In fact, what he found is that the smallest effect was on people in violent neighborhoods, because they already knew there was
What was
violence.
happening,
The biggest
right.
effect was on people in less violent neighborhoods. Then they thought there was more violence than there really was after watching all this violence.
Okay. Okay, we got an enthusiastic hand right here, and we only got a couple of minutes left, so.
So we can
Councilman.
definitely go on and on because this is a very relevant topic, but we've got time for only two more. This will be our number one, and Brian, we're going to wrap it up with you.
I'm just curious if there's any research on the most successful interventions along the lines of the mitigating factors for the social emotional learning. Is there any research on what parents can do, the most successful ones for a child who is being exposed to low-level violence? There's a spectrum of violence that kids are exposed to.
Yeah.
I'm a parent. I have a 12-year-old and a 6-year-old. There's Fortnite. There's cartoon violence. What are the most successful interventions for a parent to implement in their own home to mitigate some of the stuff that kids are seeing? Beyond the conversations, I'm just curious if there's any research on that.
Well, there is some research, but a lot of the interventions have not been very successful, and for a whole variety of reasons. For example, years ago, we tried an intervention in the Robert Taylor homes in Chicago. I don't know if you know that. And we chose it because it's a very high-risk environment and a lot of kids growing up to be violent. But it was very difficult to do the intervention we wanted because nobody wanted to cooperate. And the schools didn't really want to cooperate. Quite understandably, they were focusing on academic success. And when we wanted to go into schools and have a socio-emotional curriculum nonviolence. They weren't so happy about that because it would take time away from academics. So it's hard to do. But I know from smaller interventions that if you get very young children, like second graders, and teach them that there are good ways to solve social problems other than violence and aggression, the effect will last some time. So I know that will work.
Professor, we have our last one here.
Okay.
The gentleman, he said exactly what I'm saying. We, PhD, neighborhood leaders, police officers, councilmen, he's hitting on it, right? We should be able to solve this problem because I don't think the criminals or the people doing the gun violence are having summits like this, right? They're not. I'm an out-of-the-box thinker, right? But I'm also trying not to reinvent the wheel. One thing comes to mind. Barbara McQuade, she was Attorney General, right? The carjacking was out of hand here in Detroit. About 8 years ago, she came up with a plan and said, if you do carjacking, you're gonna get 5 years for the gun charge first, then 20 or whatever it is later. But you're gonna do that 5 with the gun right away. No, the carjackings went down. I have police officers told me, Brian, they copped to the dope, not the gun. They said, oh, no, that's my dope, not that gun. Because they know they're gonna go away for 5 years. But that went away. So that means if that was 8 years ago, the average carjacker is 25 years old. That means that dude was only 13 years old back then. How come they not keep pushing that out there like that? You're right, the media can help us. When I was growing up, when the news was getting ready to go off, they said, hey, it's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are at? We all look around in the house. Hey, where Ivan at? He ain't home. Daddy, Ivan ain't home. You know what I mean? How come we can't do something like that? How come we can't demand that for the media? Or we're videotaping stuff. How come we can't throw it up on social media and let that get shared thousands of times? And the second part about this is when somebody does something wrong, hold them accountable. Hold them accountable. If you do it wrong, go take your medicine where you got to go in jail and then use them as a PSA. Let them come on TV and say, hey guys, quit carjacking, quit holding up a gun. It's real. I got caught. These cameras caught me. My lawyer couldn't help me. Now, if I'm gonna do 5 years, I may get out in 3 because I just did this PSA and I get extra jello. I mean, something like that, but we have to start thinking out the box and start holding people accountable. That's what I'm doing. When they keep saying, oh, the jail's overcrowded, so what? Stack 4 of them up in there. Yeah. Jails is not supposed to be nice. It's supposed to be a place where you don't want to go. So that means, hey, if you want to be a low life in society, you'll be it on your front porch, not out in the street where I live. So I'm just saying, we've been talking about this for the longest. We got to start doing something about it, or it ain't going to get no better. For every disease, trust me, there's a cure. Because they didn't have a cure before they make disease. Right. And they just want to see what it's about first. Yeah. So they can stop it.
Okay. Professor, any closing remarks? Anything you want to leave us with? I think the burning question is, what do we do next?
Yeah.
What now?
Right.
Well, I think that's a question worth a long discussion. And I don't want to take time here, but I mean, I've said what I think are some important things. But I think I agree, everyone, you can solve the problem, but everyone has to work together and see that it's a problem and it's solvable.
Okay. Well, thank you. Please give a warm welcome, or thank you, to Professor Huesman. Okay. All right, so I did promise we would have some time for our partners to come before you and talk a little bit about the work that they do. You've seen them with us multiple times at our team forums, at our community forums, anything that I've asked these gentlemen to come to, they've supported us. And so today I wanted them to be able to tell you more specifically about DLive. They're right here in our neighborhood out of Sinai Grace. They're supporting a lot of our young men and women who are falling victims to gun violence. And so I think it's important for us to learn about them so that we can continue to support them. So please give a warm welcome to Ray Winans and Calvin Evans.
So again, my name is Ray Winans, and I serve as the executive director of DLive, which is the first hospital-based violence intervention program in the state. Calvin served as the chief violence intervention specialist. And again, Doc, to your point, violence is a public health disease, right? And so even when we talk about a lot of the literature and research, ACEs is one of the largest public health studies to date, right? And ACEs is the adverse childhood experiences, right? And so when we really get into the root cause and go upstream, we understand that, again, with violence being an infectious and contagious disease, it can be transmitted into the homes, right? And then you can take that disease into the schools and spread it, right? And so a lot of times, who in here know what mean? Don't do that. Who in here know that? Raise your hand if you know what mean. Then what's followed up by what you end up doing? You hit. And then what the baby end up doing? And then when you ask that baby again, you want to whoop whoop, what the baby start doing? And then start crying, right? So again, that's that toxic stress, right? That child is being re-injured. And so I challenge each one of us in here today to tell me one thing to justify hitting that child.
2-year-old.
Right? Too often what we find is us as adults, don't have the patience or sometimes just the skill set to be able to effectively communicate with toddlers. And so it becomes punitive. If you do what I say, right, not as I do, right? And so again, what we ultimately do is sometimes that child may hit somebody or hit his cousin or her cousin, and what we do, we follow it up with a hit. That ain't what you do. You don't hit people. And it's like, but you just hit me, right? And so again, big shout out to us adults. We got it right. And so we're gonna blow through this slide again. Community violence safety net, dare to create. And again, just keep in mind, DLive served as the first and only hospital-based violence intervention program based off a research paper that was done 33 years ago out of the city of Detroit, acknowledging violence as a recurrent disease. And so 3 years ago, April 8th, 2016, DLive officially launched over at Sinai to date, and we can get proud of this, right? Because again, our competition is global, right? We don't compete with each other locally. So we actually are putting on for the state. So currently to date, we have been blessed and fortunate to start our second hospital-based program over in Battle Creek, Bronson, our third one over in Saginaw, St. Mary's, and then we are opening up our fourth one, DRH, right? Receiving May the 8th, and then we are opening up St. Joseph in Washtenaw County. We will have 20 hospitals by 2013. I know I say 2013. Within the next 5 years. Listen, 20 years. It's 20 years, and we're hosting a national conference here next year, and we will make sure that everybody is invited. Because again, we have to put on.
Especially you, Doc.
Right? We have to put on for our state. And so as we blow through this, right, again, about it being a recurrent disease, these are true and real case scenarios. April 2012, you get a young man, again, for HIPAA protections, Joe A., 21-year-old male, shot in the leg, discharged. 2 years later, multiple stab wounds to the chest, survived discharge. There's a lot of data and research that shows once a person has been violently injured, their chances of being re-injured increases by up to 45% within 2 years, right? Again, Jim C., multiple stab wounds, treated, discharged within 24 hours, boom. 2 months later, multiple GSWs arrived alive, died in the ER. September 2015, GSW to the left thigh, provided antibiotics, meds, discharged, presented 7 months later, GSW dead on arrival. The dash arrows, right? Homicide is the leading cause of death for African-American males ages 14 to 30. For every one homicide, there's 109 fatals, right? So we keep, sometimes in the community, we focus on that one. We know the faces of that one. But what about those 100 that get unnoticed, right? And so when we think about it, we can do our marches, we can do our protests and everything, stop the killing, stop the killing, stop the killing. But again, we still have to understand that for every one homicide, there's 109 fatals. So here's some true quotes from some of our D-Live members. I've been having trouble sleeping. Can't get any sleep. I'm feeling pain, even though I know it's not pain where the pain is supposed to be hurting. So a guy got shot in his back, but he was like, man, I'm feeling pain in my legs, right? He like, I know the pain ain't in my legs. It's from my back, but this is what's happening with me, right? And so this was a mom who called in. My son is having headaches, nightmares, cannot sleep. He does not want to leave the house. Again, with violence being a public health disease, right, we ask the question too often. When we think about PTSD, what's the first group of individuals we associate PTSD with? Right? What's going on in our community? We got a war zone going on out here, right? So it's an urban war. I wanted to kill the guy who shot me. Most people would say, what? That ain't right. But this is the reality of the issue that we're facing with. Violence is not sexy. To be able to intervene with it, it's a heavy lift, right? Ever since I was 14 and I saw my close friend killed in front of me, violence has always been normal. It's one of my quotes. Premature morbidity and mortality, destabilization at home, community trauma, vicarious trauma, society costs, jails, prison, social capital removed. We can't arrest our way out this situation. I'm sorry. You know, you my man, Brian, but there's no way possible a criminal is going to be afraid of jail. They knew that jail existed before they committed the crime. It's the brain development, right? We're talking about those adverse childhood experiences. So with the adverse childhood experiences, we have to be mindful that your brain is wired from the age 0 to 14 before you even transition into that age 15. So if violence has been normal all your life, traditionally you will respond what? Violently. And so now you're not even trauma-informed about yourself. You don't know sometimes why you're doing the things that you're doing. You know, like I can make it personal. For me, I didn't realize why I was being so violent. I'm thinking that's just the way it's supposed to be, but I was taught to be violent, you know? So we get this tough on crime approach, war on drugs, broken window policing, gang injunctions, 3 strikes, mandatory minimums, more prisons, private prisons. Guess what? They continuously build prisons. They was building prisons while we was in there. Guess what? I ain't been back, but a whole bunch of my cousins have. A whole bunch of neighborhood kids have. So ain't nobody scared of the prisons. We can't take the tough on crime. And so if violence is a public health disease, then it has to be a cure for it, right? You acknowledged that it was a cure for it earlier, B. So, again, this is that research paper we was talking about. This is literature, right? This is what moves the needle forward, right? Again, intentional injuries in the community. Trauma is a recurrent disease. These are the publications. This urban trauma, chronic recurrent disease. Again, and this was done in the 1980s. D-Live wasn't birthed until 2016. 25% of penetrating trauma come through cyanide grace. 50% of the homicides. So we sit back and with this cancer, this heart, the strokes, the sepsis. Yeah, we can get the cures for all that, but now here's where we really get our bang for our buck at with the interventions and the cycles of violence. Right here, a youth shot, stabbed, or assaulted, get to the ER, admitted, surgical lounge, discharged back to the streets. What's the first thing that person gonna do? Your safety has been interrupted. It's called self-medicating. I'm gonna grab me a weapon. So it was a news story not too long ago, right? Y'all seen the young man one young man was shot, other one was murdered in the car crashed into the house. Well, unfortunately, that young man who survived the shooting, he's locked up before a bulletproof vest. He's locked up for a bulletproof vest. And he told law enforcement, man, the reason why I got this, man, because I just got shot, man, and I don't know who shot me, and I'm cooperating. So he's a cooperating witness, but he's currently incarcerated because he put on a vest. Somebody just got murdered in front of him. So here's where D-Live come in at. Youth get shot, treated in the emergency department, admitted to inpatient surgical lounge, discharged to the streets. We recognize right here that acute stress disorder, that PTSD, and those adverse childhood experiences. We know that this stuff has to be factored in. If not, get a weapon, self-medicate, retaliation, death, or jail. That's our sweet spot. That right there. So is violence treatable? I want y'all to take a look at that again, right? Because some people be looking like, man, what are you talking about, right? Like, for real? So again, and like I said, we're going to blow through these because I seen everything. Hospital-based violence intervention programs work, right? So from a historical lens, in Baltimore, they seen a reduction in that was San Francisco, seen a 16% reduction once the intervention was established. 4% in Baltimore. So when we come back to the city of Detroit, here's what we realize. With DLive goals, breaking the cycle of violence, our goal is to prevent repeat injury, right, or future death for safety, prevent retaliatory violence, develop a community ecosystem that it has a culture of health and community violence centered. So, DLive intervene right here, we do bedside approaches. So once a young man, young woman, and it's an all-inclusive organization, has been interrupted, their safety has been interrupted, we do the bedside approach immediately. We have designed retaliation screening forms. Right now, again, keep this at the forefront of our mind. Once a person has been violently injured, the research shows that this person has the probability of being re-injured within 2 years by 45%. To date, we've serviced, through our intervention strategies, over 100 young people, 1% re-injury. I don't think y'all heard me. 1%, right? But now, we have a population that just said, we don't want to have anything to do with this. 30% re-injury rate. That's the research, right? And so again, being able to interrupt right there, now we're looking at the educational employment opportunities, the master of skills, physical activities, the substance abuse programs, community engagement, being able to provide legal assistance through our community-based partners. But that bedside engagement is one of the key factors, right? And so those therapeutic relationships serves as part of the antidote to this issue of violence, right? The teachable moment happens at the bedside. The assertive outreach and engagement is super aggressive. If a young man tell us, man, I'm going to retaliate, Cal, what we going to do?
We're going to deliver him high doses. We're going to see him multiple times.
Multiple times. If he at that bedside and he said, I want to retaliate 9 times out of 10, if he there for 3 days, he might see us 10 times.
Then we got to know when he's going home so we can be present before we leave out.
Exactly. And so again, the social network, because we understand with anything else, just like anything else, we cannot service a young man, a young woman in their home without servicing the parents, without servicing the children. Because if we giving this one young person this information, but the information isn't in the household, it's like a kid coming home with math problems and moms don't know how to do math, or pops don't know how to do math. She'll be like, man, get that out my face. What is you talking about? The upstream thinking. So here's, and I know this is probably right up your alley. So we do this upstream approach, which is a heavy lift. So traditionally, we be like, yeah, you know, this the adults, right? Down at the bottom of the river, right? And no disrespect, no harm intended, all good humor, because we family, right? I love y'all. Y'all supposed to say, we love you too, right? I love y'all. So look, so this me right here, that's Cal, and then it's the rest of us, right? We get excited when we pick a kid up out the water, like, yeah, we just saved the kid. We saving all the kids, we saving the kids, because we all know the kids need to be saved, right? But then I'm looking like, man, didn't I just pick you up and send you back up the way? So now it's like that aha moment. Man, let's go upstream and figure out why these kids keep coming falling down in this riverbank. We recognize that a lot of these children are hungry and they're trying to cross to get to the other side, but there's no safety net for them, so they keep falling into that river, right? This is the households. Some of our children, they're running the households. They live in the conditions that mom or dad isn't there, and the systems don't know why, because they're afraid if CPS know that I'm 17 years old and I'm taking care of my siblings, they're going to come and remove all of us. So all this comes down to the social determinants of health. The physical environment, the income, social status, education, genetic endowment, coping skills, health services, social support networks, right? All the social determinants of health. So we address the social determinants of health, right? Transportation, housing, and mental health. Right now today, we can successfully say and be proud about it that we are changing the narrative around young African-American men and women who are accepting mental health services, right? Currently, we've had over 65 individuals see our therapists for one-on-one sessions. That's unheard of in our community, right? These individuals, not only are they accepting the services, they're going back into the homes. Now we have mothers and fathers coming in like, I want to see the therapist, right? So when we're talking about this violence as a public health epidemic, Daniela and Councilman Tate have allowed some of our young people to sit on panels with them, right? And so again, giving those education and exposure opportunities. Cal, you want to close us out real quick?
What am I closing us out with?
Okay, the call to action. So now, how do we create this robust system that's credible, right? Again, by partnering with community members. You'd be surprised at the resources that you just got in your refrigerator. I don't think you heard me. You'd be surprised at the resources that you got in your refrigerator.
Yes.
Exactly, right? They can just provide, you donating some food can provide a meaningful opportunity for a young person and establish a relationship, right? Tell the truth, nothing watered down. That's what we do. We ain't gonna bore y'all with the rest of the PowerPoint, right? But this is what we do. We focus on resilience. It's one thing to focus on trauma, but we're an asset framing organization. We're not looking at what's wrong with you. We want to see what's right with you. So in my closing, here's what I'm gonna challenge everybody to do. Turn to a person next to you, please, and look them dead square in the face.
You can look me in the face.
And I need you to tell me everything that you don't like about that person, everything that's wrong with them. Exactly, right? Because that's outright shame. It's shameful. It's embarrassment, right? So when we label our youth at risk and everything else, we're looking at what's wrong with them. When all I can see is your pants down, I'm looking at what's wrong with you. I can't even compliment you and tell you, young man, I like the fact that you went and got you a lineup. Young man, I like the fact that your shirt is colorful and you got on my favorite color. So when we understand that we have to start asset framing with our young people, then and only then will they start believing in themselves. With that being said, we're going to drop the mic. Not literally. Thank y'all.
Yeah, don't drop the mic literally. Thank you. Don't leave. So I know you just said a whole lot, but there are a couple.
I see air sign.
I know. Because we are on a time limit, and you know. But just what you said, even about the asset framing and what you have as a resource in your refrigerator, the asset framing, because I think the pants, Lo, and this isn't specifically gun related, but it is in a sense of building a relationship.
No question.
So how do you approach young people that all you can see, which is judgmental, is pants low? How do you approach?
You don't if that's all you can see.
Because then you're setting yourself up to build a negative relationship.
Right.
Or no
I mean, like,
relationship at
energy
all.
is real.
Right.
If you come looking at me, I'm like, man, come on, man. Like, don't look at me and I deal with what's wrong with me enough. I don't need you to deal, and all you can see is what's wrong with me. What do you see right about me? I mean, like, and that's just being real. So if all you can see is what's wrong with me, don't approach. They keep everybody safe. It keep me from going to jail and it keep you safe.
Right. So I'm sorry, I just wanted to hit on that because I think that's a huge piece of how we build a connection with our young people, but everybody. I mean, I think that's something that's universal in how we approach people. So the other thing I wanted to, I missed this part maybe, if you talked about your roundtables that you do with the guys. And how you
peer support groups.
Yep.
Yeah, what do you call it?
Trauma peer support groups. And actually, we're going to be partnering with y'all. I ain't mean to drop it on you right now.
No, that's okay, because I got some stuff.
But we're going to be partnering with everybody. So we deal with trauma peer support groups. In fact, Councilman Tate and Daniela was blessed to come out into our space and meet with some of our young men.
A couple times.
Yes.
A couple times.
A few times. And actually, one of our young men, and actually being able to connect them with local restaurants and things like that for employment opportunities, right? So with that being said, in these trauma peer support groups, it's a lot of trauma bonding. Right? And it's a safe space for young people to ultimately acknowledge their trauma, right? Acknowledge the household neglect that they've been through. Talk about the issue of them trying to complete suicide on multiple occasions, popping prescription drugs, perks, and things like that. Talking about the neglect from their mothers and things. I mean, so it's real. It's real, raw, and vulnerable. So
the idea of the trauma peer support group actually was for the purpose of social signaling. We wanted individuals to be able to go and see the therapist, have one-on-one with the therapist. So we set the therapist right inside a trauma peer support group.
Right.
And so them not knowing that this was an actual therapist, once they found out, they had a relationship with her already. And so they began to do the one-on-one with the therapist. So even as we move forward, we have individuals that are getting jobs, getting GED, that are a part of this trauma peer support group. So the social signaling is seeing individuals that come from the same condition that you come from actually beginning to excel.
Right. So with that, because I feel like you gave Councilman and I a very special invitation, and I was really grateful for that.
It was.
But
It was
how,
special.
and I'm asking that because how can the community be a part of that, or how can they support you guys? Because you're right here.
It's interesting that you asked that question. So we're actually, based on what our members told us, we're actually in the process of organizing a listening session. And so we anticipate and we have a vision of maybe 100 community members. So imagine this room right here being in a circle. And all the community is sitting in a circle, but then we have maybe 10 to 15 young people who have been exposed to violence, right? In a circle inside that big circle, and they're having a dialogue, and the community get an opportunity to listen, right? Come with an open ears and open heart. Because I guarantee you, and we've done this before, in these trauma peer support groups, we've recognized times where all we needed was the boxes of Kleenex, right? We just had to have boxes of Kleenex. And a lot of our guys wasn't crying, it was the community, because they were like, wow, we didn't know. We really didn't know. And it's okay not to know, right? That's why we're here, to have this conversation, to move the needle forward on this issue. They just asked us to come to London. I can't make this up to y'all. And we a resource for the city. But they asked us, they say, can y'all come to London? Goldman Sachs just asked us to, look, we want to pick y'all up as a partner.
I have to just interject here. So my fear a little bit is one day I'm going to reach out to you guys. And y'all going to be like, we don't have time.
But guess
we're
what?
raising our guys
We're
up.
raising our guys up.
Right.
We're raising our guys. We got a 24-year-old man who was popping 10 perks a day, robbing people, shooting at people and everything, getting away with it. Been in our program for 2 years. Never said anything to any of the guys. Heard one guy's story. Changed his life for the rest of his life. Checked himself into rehab, came out, said, ain't nobody around us doing perks, man. I'm going to step up as a leader, and I recognize what I've been doing was wrong. That's leadership. That's leadership. He in a rehab, 24 years old. That's leadership. Everybody seeing what was wrong with him. Our behavioral health team told us, y'all need to elevate this guy.
To the psychiatrist.
To the psychiatrist.
We're like,
We say elevate. Yeah, we're going to elevate, all right? We're going to leadership role. That kid is in a rehab right now.
So, Ray, and no, we haven't talked about that, but I'm definitely on board.
Everybody
to
is.
do
That's why everybody
anything.
is.
So, definitely, you guys know when we know, you guys are going to let us know and we can
Most
get
definitely,
together
because we
and
need
make
everybody.
that happen.
Like, thank you.
Daniela?
We always communicate via GovDelivery. We send out those emails. We let you all know it.
It's going to be well organized.
Yeah.
Right? And we're going to keep y'all updated with our next year's conference because we got to put on. We will put on for the city. Y'all will not be disappointed with D-Live.
So the conference, we are part of the National Network on Hospital-Based Violence Intervention Programs, and the conference is going to be held here in Detroit for the first time in 2020. So
Okay, so we all
yeah.
need to be there because I think that's the action. We all, I know a lot of people are tired of talking, but I think that's definitely an action point for us. So give it up again for D-Live. Detroit, life is valuable every day. You just hand it down. You just put it down. So thank you. I wanted to be able to give Councilman a chance to have last words. He said he doesn't have any last words. That's fine. So I want to thank you all for, So they'll be available afterwards. They are not running out, trust me. But I wanted to just say that I think there were a lot of good points, and I know definitely Bishop Chavis left, but we've had multiple conversations about the parents' responsibility to say no to their child, to discipline, hold them accountable, and then be on the same page with other educators, right? Because that's another thing that we've heard a lot of, where parents and teachers and mentors are not on the same page, and that allows the kids to kind of get away with things. So I'm not going to belabor us anymore. Remember, there is food in the back. Lots of food. We were really blessed today to be able to provide you guys with a meal. So take a plate, as we all like to say. And then, again, a lot of people are going to be around for a little bit to answer any questions or make connections or find out more information. Ms. Menifee asked, how are we going to let you all know what's happening? We always send out information by email. We're always posting on Facebook, on Instagram. We let you all know at all of our multiple meetings so that you can take that information and share it with those that we don't have a connection to. And then I am leaving my card out front. So if anybody wants to connect with me directly, you are more than welcome to do that. Again, this is not the last time we're going to get together this year. We're going to have 2 more forums. We have a partnership coming up with the Children's Center for our team forums, and our mentorship program is not going away. So we have a lot coming up. There's a lot of work to be done, and I think that everyone in this room has a role to play. So with that being said, I'm just going to say thank you. Thank you to our partners again. Thank you to Chemical Bank. Thank you to D-Live and Wayne County Community College Northwest Campus. Give a good round of applause, please. Thank you. All right, so have a good night. Be safe and enjoy.